That was Lisa's first
Yeah.
pick for the name of the podcast, and Tom and I outvoted her and said Knowledge Brokers Podcast just sounds better. She wanted Surrounded by
She was going to
Idiots.
name her team that at one point, I heard, but then they
No, that's my Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm changing it from the three families to Surrounded by Idiots.
I like that. I like that.
If you are not getting educated about current housing conditions and the economic factors surrounding them, you're doing yourself and your clients a disservice. This is the Knowledge Brokers Podcast. I'm here with Byron Lazine and Lisa Chinatti. I'm Tom Toole. And the first thing we got to talk about this week is what we've been kind of waiting for. Was it transpired the way we all thought it would, that the Federal Reserve had their June meeting, and they did not do anything to rates as widely predicted. And there's a lot of fallout and reaction from the markets around that. And what we're seeing happen here is that the Chairman Powell believes that housing may have bottomed out a little bit here. Rates might have stabilized a little bit. And they're talking about having additional rate hikes in the future. And now the markets react. This is where it gets interesting. Lisa and Byron, what do you think? There's a lot of predictions, a lot of people talking about what's going to happen next. I want to hear it from the two best knowledge brokers that I know, and that's you two.
You go first, Byron.
All right, yeah. So Powell was thank you.
Very
Lisa.
ladylike,
Appreciate
unusual
that.
on the show here.
Handoff. I have unusual handoff there.
I just curtsied.
Yeah. I think Powell, per his style, wanted to take credit for, the housing market with his interest rate jacks last year. He said, he was quoted as saying, housing is certainly very interest rate sensitive. It's one of the first places that is either helped by low rates or held back by higher rates. And we certainly saw that over the course of last year. So that was him taking credit for, where the housing market is today. We now see housing putting in a bottom. I thought that was probably, the biggest highlight for me when he said that. That was a big quote. It was in a response to a Bloomberg reporter that asked him the question. And he also said it's maybe moving up a bit. We all know, Case Shiller, everybody's reporting, yes, in fact, home prices are moving up a bit. He didn't reference whether he was talking specifically about home prices or just the market overall in terms of sales. We know that for sure, month over month, the last 3 months, home prices have moved up. Case Shiller's reported that it's 2 months. Their data is pretty lagging. I know that's the gold standard. That the April numbers, when they come out with them, they'll be reflective of that, because Zillow's home index, Redfin's home index all show Black Knight that home prices have moved up again in April. So that would make February, March, and April now 3 consecutive months. We have early reports that May, certainly we're looking at our data, in our MLSs, and we're seeing, May, I saw May for Connecticut anyways, MLS home prices did move up once again. He also said we're watching that situation carefully, so he doesn't want it to go up too much, obviously. I do think we'll see rents and housing prices filtering into housing services inflation. So we had that CPI report earlier in the week. I think it was on Tuesday, and then they met Tuesday and Wednesday. So they took the CPI into consideration when they came out with this rate pause. And if we start to see this lagging data that we've been talking about pull out of CPI, that's what he wants to see. And that's ultimately what he does believe we will see. You're now seeing more people jump on the bandwagon that I've been on for a while, that rents are coming down before the end of the year. Everybody that's running into these syndications on multifamily, I think they're going to be in a precarious spot come the end of the year when all of this inventory in multifamily housing comes onto the market. So he doesn't see them coming up quickly either, meaning, the CPI, although the CPI report on Tuesday did show an increase in rent prices. Listen, I think this is really old data. So he sees them wandering around at a low level. That's Jerome Powell. Ultimately, the biggest news out of this, outside of for us with the housing statement that Jerome Powell is recognizing a bottom and that we're now moving back up. The other big takeaway was how the market has responded to the fact that he said we're going to see 2 more federal rate increases, right? So that could be as early as July when they meet the 25th and the 26th. And, if that happens, that means the markets are a little bit more uncertain. That's why you haven't seen a huge drop in the 10-year. You saw it come down a little bit, but they don't know that there's uncertainty again, just like there's been for the course of the last 12 to 18 months. There's just too much uncertainty. There are billions of dollars being factored into the fact that this 10-year is going to drop. This is the bets, hundreds of billions of bets that investors are making that this number is going to come down. And that if we look back and go back to the George Ratu podcast that we did here on Knowledge Brokers, go back and listen to that if you've missed it. We should be at 5% interest rates on the 30-year fixed. And there are bets, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of bets that say that we will be at 5%. Now, we know that forecasters are coming out today and saying the next couple months don't expect any drop in the 30-year, probably more of a sideways move. But long term, you look at the end of this year and going into the end of 2024, you should see a 30-year fix come down into the fives. I think in the near term, the next 30 days, you're just going to see more uncertainty, and you're going to see a 30-year fix that hovers, quite frankly, around where it's been between 6.5 and 7. Lisa, what was your big takeaway?
No, I think very much the same. I think, we were kind of chatting a little bit earlier about the mortgage rates and, whether people thought that they were going to drop or remain steady. And I think I had been saying for a while that I predicted that they would stay steady because I think everybody predicted the hold, or enough people were predicting the hold, that it had already kind of been accounted for. I'm just kind of looking forward to July and kind of watching some of the stuff going on, like you said, with respect to rents, with respect to housing prices across the board. I think you mentioned, some softening for that multifamily rentals. I think the other thing that we all kind of need to keep an eye on, and it was talked about earlier this year in maybe in February and March, there was some media coming out, and it's kind of been a little bit quiet since then. But what's going on with Airbnb rentals? I think we're still seeing that Airbnb rental and bookings are down. I don't know that they've actually picked up as we head into the summer market, like people were hoping they were, or hoping they would. And I think that that's also kind of an indication that there could be some trouble brewing with those vacation rental properties, folks who are leveraged on 2, 3, 4, more of those kind of properties that don't have the depth to be able to support that with decreased bookings.
A lot of people got real bullish on Airbnb, and so they went out and bought properties on cheap money. You're now seeing not just that small time investor who did the Airbnb, but you're also seeing big time investors of single family real estate not only pull back on their purchases, that's been happening all year, but you just saw Sternlight from Starwood Capital come out, and this was a Bloomberg report this week. They're selling 2,000 of their 3,300 single family homes, not at a distressed price. They picked these 2,000 up in 2021. They have 125,000 apartment rentals. And this is one of the models that I keep referencing where rent prices are coming down. They're looking into the future and they're like, okay, single family rent prices aren't going to go up at the rate certainly that they have been, and they might possibly come down. They're going to offload 2,000 properties. You have Amherst, who owns, listen to this number, 44,000 single family units. They've stopped buying completely. There was a report in Fortune from them where their CEO is one of the folks saying, hey, this, just like George Ratu, this interest rate should come back down to 5%. When that happens, they may get back in the game. But between now and then, they're not going to be buying single family rents. That small time investor. So ultimately, here's what I think is going to happen. I think we're going to see more inventory in 2024 than we've seen in any point in 2022 and 2023. We have a whole bunch of multifamily inventory coming on the end of the year. We do have 700,000 single family units that are being built right now. That it's not a huge number. Doesn't make up the 2 to 7 million that everybody's saying we have a shortfall, but it's a significant number. And then when you have some of these institutional buyers putting more inventory onto the market, and like Lisa, you just said, some of the small time investors may just have to get out of those properties if they don't have the Airbnb rent. And I agree with that. I'm in a shoreline town in Connecticut for the summer, and I said to my wife this week, I said, hey, is summer starting late? I don't see the amount of people I typically see here, it's also easier to get a summer rental. There's still some folks that have a listing where the last 2-3 years, if you waited till June, you were out. You weren't getting one. And so I agree. I think it's softening up a little bit, and it doesn't mean that don't go telling somebody that home prices are going to drop 10, 20, 30%. Doesn't mean that. It just means we may see some more inventory hit the market, which would be a welcome sign to everybody.
Yeah, I think the key there is that more inventory still doesn't even
Nope.
mean a balanced market for places
Correct.
like us, right? And I think that that's the key is, understanding how much that inventory actually changes things like absorption rate or how much demand it will actually fill, right? It potentially just means more homes, but
But
still not enough.
4.5 months of inventory would be much better than 2.5. I mean, it would still be a seller's market, but
Oof.
wouldn't that be a
Correct.
welcome sign to all agents and home shoppers?
You bring
Yep.
up a good point
Yeah.
about the vacation rentals, Byron. We were talking with an agent.
Well, that was
I'm
Lisa. I'll
talking
give the
about the
credit to Lisa. I
anecdotal
mean,
Thank
evidence,
you.
of you living in Florida,
Yeah.
because I was talking with a woman who works up in the Hamptons, and they handle primarily rentals, and people were renting these houses out for $50,000 a month, and they can't fill these houses anymore. People don't want to spend that kind of money, and they're better off. And here's the thing that no one's talking about: you're better off going on like a European vacation, because it's almost costing less with the value of the dollar to go on these expensive vacations. That people, they started doing these things a lot during the COVID pandemic, which got us into this problem in the first place with what the government did then, and bringing rates down. And now people are taking their money abroad because they're having these extravagant vacations that would cost them the same as renting a house somewhere on a beach where you're going to sit down to the same place you've been going for 20 years. So there's real intel there in the anecdotal evidence as well as the raw data, which we know Lisa only looks at the data and has no emotions or anecdotes in her life. So
Well, you'll both like this data. Bloomberg reported exactly what you're talking about, the conversation you had with the Hamptons broker. They did a whole piece on this in the last 30 days. I covered it on the hot sheet. So in July, they just picked out particular properties. This one's called Southampton Seclusion. We can maybe put a couple of these up as graphics, Cooper, but Southampton Seclusion in July 2020, the price was 120,000. In July 2023, it was 110,000. This is for the rental. Okay. Village Fringe Luxury in East Hampton. Last year it was 70,000 to rent. This year it's 60,000. Art Village Retreat, Southampton, 75,000 last year, 60,000 this year. Last year's price for Sandpiper Spindrift in West Hampton, 75,000. This year, 68,000. North Fork Waterfront. This one was 50,000 last year, 40,000 this year. So there's plenty of examples. And I listen, if it's happening in the Hamptons, it's happening in many luxury markets where they're either not filled or they're just at a lower cost, right? Or at a lower price to go ahead and rent. I'd love to know in the comments from any of your markets if you're seeing something similar. I am seeing the luxury buyer, the wealthy client pull back, not, in a huge way, but they're being more conscientious of the spending that they're
some of
doing
those
right
numbers
now.
you went over, I mean, you're talking about a 10% reduction. I mean, that's not insignificant here. So I mean, but 75 to 68, I mean, it's right there. So I find that to be pretty interesting, and that kind of supports what's going on with the inflation data metric. That number is coming down a bit because this is real live data, and it's kind of dated to your point. So uh, I do like the idea of seeing more inventory come on the market in 2024, and for the agents that are listening and the knowledge brokers especially, I think it's all the more reason you've got to gut it out right now these next 6 months to set yourself up for 2024. I mean, not that the year's over by any stretch. There's a lot of business to be done, but there's going to be some people that wait for the market to settle down and wait for these rates to come down, and you can't fault them for that, especially if they've got a long-term view of the market. And we know that 65% statistic of homeowners that have a 3 or 4 interest rate.
The long-term view of the market for the knowledge broker is more important than it's ever been. I reacted to a Graham Stephan clip on the Real Word podcast this week where he was talking about how it took him 6 months before he got his first deal. I mean, these numbers are huge because he was selling back when he was an agent. He's a big YouTuber now, but when he was an agent, he was selling in Beverly Hills area. And it took him, I think, 6 or 8 months before his first paycheck. And it came from an open house, and it was like a $3.5 million deal. It was somewhere north of 3 million. But he referenced the fact that most agents will quit at the 6-month mark, and they consider that, giving it a try, giving it the old college try. And he's like, had I quit at 6 months, I wouldn't have gotten a near $200,000 commission check. I wouldn't have been in the position I'm in today. And gutting out the next 6 to 8 months is all about thinking of the future. It's all about thinking of what 2024 is going to look like, continuing to build and grind out every single day. It's something I need to remind myself of all the time. And you guys help me with that constantly. Hey, we got to keep building. We got to keep planning.
Yeah, I think the 6-month mark is interesting because I think you also have to remember in a commission only industry, I think most people don't have savings to really go beyond 6 months when they're just starting out, right? So it not shocking, makes sense. And part of why the failure rate within the industry is above 80% of agents don't renew their license in 2 years.
I saw a report today in Housing Wire, and it said that most mortgage lenders, or 60% of mortgage lenders to be exact, 60% of mortgage lenders are living paycheck to paycheck right now. What's your gut feel, Lisa, on how many agents are living commission check to commission check? And if an agent came to you and said, I don't know how I'm paying my bills right now. I'm committed. I want to be a knowledge broker. I want to make this a career, not just a year. What's your advice to them over the next 6 months to pay their bills and continue to build and be in position for the fruit that's coming in 24 and 25?
I think much like we've always kind of said, I think sometimes you have to look at it and say, is the short term sacrifice of driving Uber, doing a part time job, whether it's waiting tables, tending bar, doing whatever, is that short term sacrifice? And, depending on how confident you are in your skills, is taking on some business debt worthwhile in order to do it? But it's no different than when an agent is starting to build their business and we're talking about hiring a first assistant, right? If you're going to do those things, you've also got to be committed to continuing to make the phone calls and continuing to build the business and not just using the free time in different ways, right? If you're going to take another job to continue to stay in the industry, you still have to balance time and get the main activities done. Otherwise, it's just going to be a slow burn, even slower burn out of the industry, unfortunately.
So you'd advocate what I agree with, which is just working more hours right now. And that might mean waiting tables at night and working, your career 40, 50 hours. It's just basically having 2 jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to one of my very first business coaches told me something that has stuck with me to this day. You will work harder than others will for 5 to 10 years to live the life that others can't for the rest of your years, right? And if that means working 80 plus hours a week for a period of time in order to put yourself into a position where you can either live your dream or stay in the industry that is your dream industry, I think you have to question whether you're willing to do it.
Well, times like
I
these
agree.
where the market's uncertain, people are getting out of the industry. We've already seen realtors leave. I know we all chart this. The agent movement, the first half of the year has been incredible. How many people are going somewhere else looking for that magic bullet? The best agents are made in markets like this. I mean, the people that are the most successful that can sell homes now, they're going to be able to really reap the benefits when the market does turn around, because invariably, we saw this in 2020. So many people got into the business because they thought it was easy. And 2020 was easy. I think is the key word than what we saw. Same thing with 2021. And then as soon as the going gets tough, they either move, they want to go somewhere with more opportunities, they want to build relationships instead of making phone calls. You've heard all the excuses. I mean, and it's always like that. And in this business, the funnel is so simple. One of my very first business coach told me this, Lisa. You've got 4 things to do as a real estate agent. Byron and I did the top 10 list or the top 5 list a couple shows ago. It's talking to people, right? You got to talk to people, educate them about the market, Let them know what's going on with rates, inventory, all these things. Then you've got to set appointments with these people and make the appointments happen. So you got to set and run the appointments. That's 2 and 3. And then write and negotiate contracts. And if you're focusing on all these other things, like, I mean, if you don't have anything going on in your business right now, you know what you should do in the afternoon after you make your calls in the morning? Make more phone calls. Like it's the simplest thing to do. And the people that want to avoid that are avoiding success in this business.
There was a survey that 1000 Watt just did, and I sent you guys the snippet where 1/3 of agents have, so 1 out of every 3 agents essentially have switched a brokerage in the last 2 years. And that type of movement tells you everything about, the concern that they have, and there's a variety of reasons why, but ultimately I do agree it boils down to this uncertainty and safety that agents are feeling right now. Lisa, you did some digging in your MLS that shows how market share is also shifted. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, it was super cool. I was getting just curious today about some stats in specific zip codes and towns and some of the bigger markets. And it was fascinating. I looked at 2022, the entire year as a picture, and what was the market share that was held by either the top agent or the top team in that market compared with year to date. What is the market share held by the top team or the top agent in the market? And in general, we were finding that that top person's position had grown between either 50% or 100%. So not meaning that they own 50 or 100% of the market, but that the amount that they owned grew. So where we were seeing in one zip code last year, an agent had owned 2.9% of the total market share. And this year, that same agent owned 6.1% of the total market share in a particular zip code. And across the board, there were very few markets where the dominant agent lost market share. But across the board, it seemed like for the most part, the average agent who was dominant was more dominant this year than they were last year, which I wasn't necessarily surprised about. But on the other hand, I kind of was. It was an interesting way to really look at the data.
Not at all.
Yeah, it's not shocking. And you always hear the stat, the 80/20, 20% of agents do 80% of the work in the MLS. That's kind of like a rule of thumb, back of the napkin number that you can run through your MLS. And I think that trend's going to continue, maybe even more so in the second half of 23 as we go into 24, because of the way the market's moving. Because if you have a sideways interest rate, if you continue to see the level of transactions that we're dealing with right now prolonged throughout 23 before we get more of this inventory onto the market, yeah, it's going to kind of filter to the top.
The other interesting thing that came from it was that while the dominant person's market share may have grown, it wasn't always the same person who was coming out as the dominant agent. And that part was probably more interesting, is that in one market in particular, last year, the dominant agent had a 9.4% market share. This year, that agent dropped to sub 6%, but the person who jumped in as the number one spot had over 13% market share. So it's really kind of fascinating to ponder why some of those things were happening. I mean, I think we know why, right? But interesting to watch.
It is. Do you either you think we're going to see a similar movement? 1 out of 3 agents move a brokerage over the next, call it, year?
I do. My gut says that right now we're in a slightly lower time for agent movement at the moment. But I do believe that, what are we, June 15th? I do believe that by September 1st, we're going to see a whole bunch of agent movement coming back up.
If you look at the top, though, what we were just talking about, typically that top market share owner makes maybe 1 or 2 big moves in their career, but they're not bouncing around every couple of years. That's for sure. The top producers find that team, find that brokerage, and stick with it. And you might see one big move that just makes sense culture wise or whatever, but you don't see them bouncing around every 2 years.
No, 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 not at all. One of the other trends that I actually want to track from a broker perspective, right, is looking at, are we seeing an increase or a decrease in the number of brokerages that an agent is at over the span of a 5-year period? So if we go back and look at 2018 to 2023 and we compare agents of certain tenures, are we seeing that the agent now has more or less brokerages in their tenure within the industry? I think it'll be interesting to look at. Kind of tying into, there's been some really cool reports. I don't know how much you guys track it, about the mentality of the workforce based upon certain generational kind of factors, right? And seeing that in some generations that loyalty is coming back. It was really interesting. It was Gen Y or Gen Z, I don't remember exactly. I could pull it out later. Where they felt if they were connected to the mission and connected to the values, that they reported wanting to stay much longer term. And I'm going to be interested to kind of compare that within the real estate space, which is very entrepreneurial minded and not necessarily as employee minded, and see
Mm-hmm.
if there's some correlations there.
Yeah, they definitely think about work differently. But you see, as they age up, it
Oh,
changes. It changed. So if you look at an older segment of these generations compared to the ones that are, just starting out their work
well,
life,
it's a business.
it's much different.
Go ahead.
Well, but I think I agree. And you two know how I feel about certain demographics. I do believe that in some of them, though, we might be seeing a switch come back to that. My generation, I don't know about you two, so I
We're all
think
the
we're
same
slightly
generation here.
hovering on different generations. All right, fine. But I don't smirk.
I
You
don't
may
think we
not
are in the
be.
same
I'm on the
generation. I think
edge,
Lisa's
and
in.
Lisa would be solid. I mean, it's Gen X and millennials is what we're talking about here. So
I'm the grandfather of the millennial generation.
Yeah,
I'm the old
exactly.
man.
Exactly.
You're in that weird generation that has like 3
no,
years
I'm
or
on the
something.
edge. If it depends. Oh,
No, Lisa's in the weirdo generation. I forget what they
I am
call
in
it.
the
Gen
weirdo
X?
gen, and I own the weirdo
I mean, look,
generation.
she's got a
But
she's got a rubber worm in her hand right now. She's got her own
Generation
generation.
Chinatti.
exactly. Right? Uh, you totally made me lose my thought process.
You were saying the generation that you're in.
Oh, I think that I think my generation is fixing the shit that happened with the children coming up in your generation. Your generation is whacked. My generation with our kids is fixing your generation.
Your generation I guess that'd be mid-40s?
Yeah, I'm 45.
Yeah, exactly. So mid-40s right now, I would say are the dominant power players in almost every, whether it's tech or, whatever you look at. That is the generation right now that to me is making a lot of the powerful decisions throughout companies and economy. I mean, besides Jerome Powell and, government policy that, they're all over the hill, but anything privatized, that's the generation that's making a lot of the power moves.
But I think even in home, though, like I think what I'm saying is that I think my generation is raising our children a little bit differently than the generation before us
I
raised
agree
you
with that. I mean,
millennials.
as a
I,
parent, I
I,
mean, my kids are a bit older than yours, Byron. But you know what I don't like? Participation trophies. You know what I don't like? Lack of
yep,
accountability
exactly.
when kids do things wrong at school. I mean, the stuff that happens, and my kids go to a well rated public school district, and the things that I've seen happen this year, where there's death threats being made by students, and there's no consequences for these kids. I mean, it's wild to me, and that doesn't fly in the Toole family household.
Uh,
And I mean, these are real life things that have happened. You can Google it, and I mean, Lisa, it sounds like you're in the same boat where it's, hey, what you do has consequences, and that has been lacking a little bit. And I think we do see it in the workplace with some of the younger generations.
well, to Lisa's point, like the situation you just stated, oftentimes there's not enough
Oh,
accountability with the parents, like actually feeling like, hey, this is on me the way I'm parenting. They want to blame it solely on the kid being, oh, they're messed up. They've been on, X, Y, and Z pill since they were a kid, and they want to blame it all on that, as opposed to stepping in as a parent and saying, yeah, I have some accountability here in the way I've been parenting.
Correct.
All right, Tom, where are we
We'll
taking
be
it?
here all
That could
day.
go
All
down a
right,
whole nother
so
road. Where are we taking it next?
Lisa sent us something about the HPSI, which is the
Dude, this was my week. I'm so
about
good this
time.
week.
That's a big
It's
Lisa
the
Chinatti
National
week.
Housing Survey, and there were 6 questions that were used to calculate Fannie Mae's Home Purchase Sentiment Index, and only 2 of the 6 components from the HPSI improved from April to May, and we're seeing that there's some lower buyer sentiment, which is no surprise to me given what the Fed said. Hey, we're going to keep raising rates. We're just pausing it here. Rates have bounced up towards 7 again, and that we're now in this situation where buyer sentiment is continuing to decline. And I don't know if you're seeing that in your markets. I'm certainly feeling it from the folks that are kind of on the fence. While there are always motivated people in the marketplace, I guess my question is this going to continue until we see some clarity from the Fed? And a lot of this has to do with declining home sales, less inventory on the market, although supply is up in some places in terms of the month supply inventory. What's your reaction here on home buyer sentiment? Because staying positive with these folks is a real skill that knowledge brokers should work on developing if they don't already have it already, along with empathy. If you want to be the knowledge broker in your marketplace, you need BAMX. It is a curated community of on-demand courses like the world-renowned Tom Toole, the best objection handler in the country, showing you how to handle seller and buyer objections on a consistent basis. Canva courses, how to design your own marketing so you can appeal to people on social media through email and look like a professional. And you get a private community with other like-minded folks like you that want to make their business better. Use the code Knowledge Brokers for 10% off. Get BAMX now. Do yourself a favor and go outwork and out-educate your competition.
My reaction is yes. You're going to have more opportunities at the end of the year than you do right now. I firmly believe that for a home shopper. If it's the advice that I'm giving my sister, who's been searching for 3 years, and I'm continuing to preach patience with her, it's the right advice for every home shopper. Doesn't mean I'm telling her to stop looking and going out on showings and going to open houses and submitting offers when the right opportunities come up, which we are. But my advice is firm that I do believe in a 30-year being closer to 5 than 7 in the long term. That could be 12 months. I do believe in more inventory in 2024 than in 2023. So don't get crazy. Don't let what one agent tells you is a crazy market. No, it's a complex market. You've got to be smart. Don't let the fever pitch put you in a position that you're making such an extreme offer that 10 years isn't enough to make up what you overpaid. You're looking at 15. Right? If it's a 10-year window, I'm comfortable with that because you're going to stay in the house 10 to 12 years on average. But if you're putting yourself back 15 years, I'm not comfortable with it, whether you're related to me or you're a client.
I agree. Same thing across the board. I think it's important to understand how the consumer feels. I think again, I hope was it Byron who
No,
mentioned
that was me.
empathy earlier? Ironic
Yeah, that
statement coming
was definitely Tom
I'm
trying
trying
to
to suck up
suck
to
up
people
to
and tell
everybody.
you work the market right now. You're welcome.
Give the credit to Tom, Lisa, and go.
All right. So, I mean, yeah, that's where the credit
Correct.
belongs. But empathy is hugely important. It is an insanely tough market. I think we can all understand that. I think, being able to help consumers, whether it's on the buy side, because that same report actually also said that, what was it, something like 65, 67% of Americans believed it was one of the best times to sell. Right. And so it's really interesting. Clearly, it's a seller's market. So they think that. The interesting part to me is that a good chunk of those sellers are also buyers, right? Which is, again, why the inventory is locked. But being able to be empathetic, ask the questions, and dig deeper is super important, and providing the education to help them understand that if it's a really great time to sell, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad time to buy.
Questions are the control of the conversation. It puts you in the knowledge broker seat. If you're asking questions, being curious, for the knowledge broker that needs the right questions to ask a home shopper who's feeling like these buyers with the uncertainty, where they're feeling down about the market, what are some of the questions to keep the knowledge broker in the driver's seat that agents should be
Well,
asking?
the first question every agent should be asking their clients before they meet them is, "Hey, so I know we're looking to do X, Y, and Z." They got to get clear on their motivation, and it's what's important to you about this decision. Like what's that going to do for your household? Because if you're trying to force someone to transact and they're not motivated, it's not going to happen. I mean, I think the biggest mistake I see and challenge I see agents have is they're running around with these buyers. They're showing them houses, and some of them have looked at. I don't know what the average is in your market. The average is typically like 6 to 10 before they make an offer, is what we've seen. But they're showing 20, 30, 40 houses. Well, they may not be that motivated. They may just want to go out and try to find a deal right now. We know those deals don't exist because it's such an extreme seller's market. So, what's important to you about making this move? What's that going to do for you? And get clarity around that. And then the second question is, hey, if this doesn't work out, what's your plan B? What's your backup plan? And see if they even have one. Because when you get the folks, and these people do transact, don't get me wrong. Hey, Lisa, if we find the perfect house, we'll buy it right now. We're ready to go. But the perfect house looks like this, and we're only having it check 95% of our boxes, or we're not moving because we're in a nice house right now and we've got a 3.5% mortgage rate. So that's a very different buyer than, hey, this place is going to give us more space for our family. My wife is pregnant with twins and we've already got 2 kids and we're in a 3-bedroom house. And yeah, we know what's going on, but I can't live like this anymore because I got 1 bathroom on the second floor. Like that's what, and so many folks, they don't, this isn't a first call question here. I hope everyone's with me on this. This is after you build some rapport, set the appointment.
Yeah.
You've got to go. I'd meet anyone once. And that's some other advice from knowledge brokers, that meet anyone once and then get into it with them. Because if you start being too picky or too choosy with who you're meeting with, you're probably losing business. So it's understanding and asking the right questions. But what's their plan B and what's important to them about it? You guys ever have a seller where they didn't know where they were moving, but they thought it was a great time to sell? Right? Well, if they don't know where they're
Oh
moving,
yeah.
they're not freaking moving. I mean, it's just
They're going to be very selective on those. They're going to get
yes.
scared when those offers come in. Lisa, how about I think Tom's hitting it, but going back another step, because I know some are thinking this in their head right now. What about specifically the home shopper who is very guarded about their motivation? They're not open to some of those initial questions about sharing true motivation, because once you dig down and get true motivation, that's going to be the unlock. So breaking through that guarded home shopper with the right questions to really find true motivation, not just, not just the motivation of we want to be in this school district or we need a bigger house, like the true underlying motivation. What are some breakthrough questions?
I think for that, it's super important to understand the personality type of the person on the other side. The breakthrough question is the first word is going to be different, whether it's a driver, an analytical, expressive, or an amiable, right? And being able to understand personality type guides how you're going to frame the question, which question you're going to ask, and where that whole conversation goes. If you don't understand the personality type, it's going to be really difficult to figure out how to frame those questions in the right way.
So agents should be researching personality types.
Yeah, totally. Versatile Selling is one of my favorite books to read about selling to personality
We give that
types.
to every
Why are you
agent that
smirking,
comes
Tom
on our
Toole?
team. And then when they struggle with the people that, oh, they're asking all these questions about the improvements to make and everything else. I mean, you okay, that's analytical. Let's look at how to deal with them. Like there's a science behind
Yep.
this. And that's what folks think. Yeah, I got a great personality. I can sell to
Yep.
anybody. It's not how it goes.
We-
No.
I had a question from an agent about an analytical seller recently, and they met once, and then the seller wanted all this data and reports sent to him. So the agent was like, yeah, I'm sending him all this information, wants to go really deep on the market like an analytical would. They want charts and numbers and information. They want to look at it from every single angle. They're somebody who truly wants to position price at the perfect price when they go to the market, and they want to take the time to dig through all those numbers. And so I said to her, I said, okay, it sounds like you're emailing this information over. Yeah, that's what he wants. No, what he wants, what an analytical wants, is for you to line all that information up and sit down with them face to face and go through everything. So the next step is so important. If you know you're sitting in front of an analytical person on a listing appointment, especially, understand you're probably not signing the contract that day. They're very, very unlikely to sign the contract. And if an analytical does sign the contract, they're probably calling you at 9 p.m. that night saying, hey, can you rip that up? I need more, whatever. So your goal on that listing appointment is set the next listing appointment, because the next listing appointment is probably, if you do it right, signing or at least decision-making time. So collect the data, get the data to them, and then, but make sure before you leave that appointment, you're setting appointment number 2 so that you're going over it with them together. And don't plan on a half hour. Don't plan on an hour. Every analytical listing appointment I've been on, I've blocked off an hour and a half to 2 hours, and the listings are gold. Be willing to do it.
Just be right. Just build a
100%.
buffer in your
Another
schedule.
great book.
That's the best
Sorry.
advice.
Yeah,
Totally. Sure. One of the other books that I love to have people read about this is a book called Surrounded by Idiots. Because I think one of the hardest things is, even once you understand the personality type and understand the questions, it's very difficult still to understand how stressful situations make each of those personality types react. Yes, Surrounded by Idiots.
We're going to rename the podcast like Lisa Chinatti, Surrounded by Idiots. That's what she wants.
That was Lisa's first pick for the name of the podcast, and Tom and I outvoted her and said Knowledge Brokers Podcast just sounds better. She wanted Surrounded by Idiots.
She was going to name her team that at one point, I heard, but then they
No, that's my Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm changing it from the 3 families to
Surrounded by. I like that. My team wanted to change the name to Led by an Idiot, and then I just go with the one team. It's more generic. There you go. We'll link Lisa's book suggestions down below. Maybe we should start a Knowledge Brokers book list. That would be. Let us know. Do you want the Knowledge Broker book list? We can all pick our top 5 or top 10 and create a library of book suggestions.
I like a top.
Ooh, that's fun.
We should do a top 5 next week with the books. I like that. Like a top 5. Like, maybe pick some topics. We can do a draft style. Maybe 6, so we each get 2 picks. I like this.
All right, so top 6 Knowledge Broker books coming next week on the pod, which means you really need to subscribe to this podcast. If you haven't done that already, subscribe so you don't miss it. And we're going to have our top 6. We're going to do the draft pick. So if Tom picks one, you have more than 2, Lisa. If Tom has first selection, he picks one of yours, you're going to have some more lined up. We're going to do a whole
good draft board would
next
have
week's show.
6 picks in case they all go. Just an FYI.
Okay, thanks, boys.
Tom's getting ready for his
quit
fantasy football draft
a long time ago because I care more about being a knowledge broker than being a fantasy football knowledge broker. So it's
well, Tom, I think you could connect with some past clients and you could grow some referrals.
No. I mean, if you want to talk about one of the all-time time wasters for a business person, it's the people that are sitting there adjusting their fantasy lineup every week. It's like you might as well just stop working in the fall. They're checking the waiver wire. It's horrible. Knowledge brokers don't do that stuff. Let me tell you.
It's a lot of work, but I'm still an advocate.
It takes a lot of time.
Football. You got to have something. Well, I mean, I'm not saying I win these leagues. I'm just saying I don't have the time to win them. All right, where do we want to wrap up? I got a high school graduation.
I'm curious about this. So you're going to a high school graduation. There's a graduation for every. You were at a kindergarten one a couple weeks ago. Am I right? Well, okay, that one makes sense. But I get kindergarten, but
goddaughter.
I have a 4th grade one coming up tomorrow. I have to go to.
That's insane. 4th grade
he's
is
going
not
to middle
acceptable.
school.
What are you graduating?
Is that normal?
I was just going to say, yeah, that just happened here. And I was like, apparently it's here too, because somebody in my office just said that they went to a 4th grade graduation today too. And I said, duh.
Yeah.
Beep out the word I'm about to say.
I mentioned this to our sales manager, Brian, and he goes, hey, you know what my mom did for me when I graduated 4th grade? She got me a pack of Lifesavers. So that's what Leo's getting tomorrow for his 4th grade graduation. I'm going to go buy a pack of Lifesavers. Congrats, pal. Here you go.
I bought my goddaughter a
Is it a
Louis
hot
bag,
dog Louis
which
bag by
is
chance? I'm guessing
crazy.
no.
No, it's not a hot dog bag.
Yeah, I was waiting
Lisa, we
for
need the
that.
hot
That's
dog bag in the background of your set.
Oh, yeah. I'll bring it next week. We'll
Li
wean her out.
If you don't know what that means, Lisa won a Louis Vuitton bag from me, and she won a very expensive hot dog. I don't know, Kim Kardashian wore it. Well, it was a $5,000 bag. Tom Toole
No,
bought
it
her.
was
yeah.
a
So
six
I
thousand
told
dollar
Lisa
bag. I
if
got
it's
suckered into
it's
paying
$6,000.
she
a thousand
Venmoed me the
dollars for a
difference. I was
wiener.
not paying a dime, a penny more than
I don't I don't blame you. We did lose a bet though, a transaction bet to Lisa, and so we owed her some bags.
one
That
of the
was
best
last
bets
year.
we ever
I
made.
do
There's no more
think
bets.
we
I don't
need
need another
another
bet.
bet.
This is
Yeah. What were you gonna say,
I
Lisa?
need. We need more bets.
All right, we'll make a bet. We'll
yeah, the book.
first
Yeah,
let's
whoever
get through the
wins the
book
book
draft next
draft,
week, and then we'll make some
Lisa
knowledge
can
poker
buy
bets.
buy the win or something. How about that?
Did you have an angle on
I
the
was
high
just
school
I'm more
graduation?
curious
Something I
how
should be doing
often these
there?
graduations happen. I mean, it seems like it's constant.
Oh, it's graduation season. I will be sitting right next to the godmother of this person who's graduating, and she owns a big appliance store. So there will be some
I mean,
networking
that
going
sounds like a
on
great
at the
opportunity
very
to
least.
work that person into your sphere. Like, hey, you need some new appliances, and
Oh, she's
I
she's
like it.
deep into the sphere. She's deep in the sphere, but I'll be able to pick her brain on maybe what's going on. That's a great thing to do if you have a local shop appliance, network with the owner. They can tell you. I saw a report like Home Depot when they had their earnings report come out. They're projecting less. Actually, I know we had thought more people are going to be doing additions, but people are holding back right now. So they're actually projecting less for the rest of the year on some of these home improvement goods. I'd love to, you should find out locally, like what's your local appliance? Is business up? Are they projecting up for quarter three, quarter four, or are they projecting it down? What does it compare to a normal year? That'll give you some indication on how many people are making improvements into your house. And obviously, those are just good questions to build rapport and build that relationship. All right. So next week we've got the book draft, the top 6 knowledge broker books. Subscribe, don't miss it.
So I'm
Final
looking at
parting
the
thoughts, anyone?
CME Fed Watch market tool, and it looks like it is a slam dunk. They're going to be raising rates, and what do you think that does if they continue to raise rates here? They're talking about an every other meeting rate hike at this point. I mean, a lot of people are saying we're just going to be bouncing between 6 and 7 until this CPI data comes down a little more, which is the problem with it being lagged. I mean, what are your parting shots here on that, you two?
I think the CPI data is already
Yep.
overinflated because rents are coming down and they haven't caught up. And so I think if the Fed continues to raise rates, which it looks like right now that's the consensus for July when they meet the 25th and 26th, it could change between now and then. But if they do decide to ignore real-time facts like rent, then I think they're going to push us into a recession. If they keep this is what they've typically done. They raise and raise and raise until we're in recession and then they start cutting. Yesterday, the Fed said that we're not going to cut this year at all. We're not going to cut until 2024. They said the end of 2024, we're going to be looking at a 4.5 to 4.75 range. Right now, we're at a 5 to 5.25 range. So that tells you they're only going to cut a couple times next year. If they're going to be raising until next year and then start cutting, I think that's a mistake. Just stay where we're at throughout the year and continue to collect data. Why push us into a recession when the economy and the job market is strong? The more they ratchet this up, the more likely it is for people in everyone's community to lose jobs. Good people that don't deserve to lose their jobs will lose their jobs if they go too far. By them saying they're going to raise rates, I think that's going too far.
My hope is that they see the light. I don't know that they're going to. I mean, this seems like a very hawkish pause here, as a lot of folks pointed out yesterday. And you know what I get worried about the same thing you do, Byron, that they're going to force the issue here because they're not looking at real time data, and there's such a big component of shelter in there in that CPI data. Now, the one thing I do see is that it's going to be a live meeting in July because they haven't made a decision yet. So it sounds like they're open minded, but I don't believe anything these people say until it actually happens.
No, I don't believe that your internet was so good
If
this week. I can't
we
believe
got
it.
a we got a
Way to
new
go,
streaming
Tom. This
laptop.
was
We found the
it was
issue, so it's
unbelievable.
the best of the best. Thanks to my good friend who runs an Apple computer sales website and an Apple blog. So we got it from him.
Lisa, no, no kudos to Tom for the
there's nothing to be
high-speed
celebrating
internet
here. This
this
is what
week.
it should be
No,
at a
it should
business.
be a
Yes, thank
basic
you.
expectation. Exactly.
It's a
This
necessity.
this is
I agree.
not
I
the
don't want it.
participation trophy.
Cut this out.
See,
Cut it out.
millennial,
Cut it out.
non-millennial.
To, I'll send you a
Well,
Venmo.
I'll take your
a
money.
participation
That's fine.
Venmo, Tom. All right. Thank
you're
you,
not.
guys. Good show.